Hello, with this video we would like to give you information about how to design a human intervention study to evaluate health benefits of a nutritional education program at the schools. Nutrition education is a key element to promoting lifelong healthy eating and exercise behaviors and should start from the early stages of life, since fostering healthy eating practices and regular physical activity has the potential for a major impact on health and well-being during childhood and later stages in life. In this context, schools provide the most effective and efficient way to reach a large segment of the population, including young people, school staff, families, and community members. School-based nutrition education should address the needs and interests of students, teachers, and the school, be relevant to program goals, take into account what children already know and can do, be culturally appropriate, be delivered in a way children can understand and teach the skills and knowledge required to improve healthy eating habits. So the aim of this video is to briefly describe some of the key points that any researchers should need to consider when designing, conducting, and reporting a study protocol for a human intervention study. For this purpose, we need to consider the relevance of defining the study protocol. Which factors do we need to take into account? First of all, we need to define the study hypothesis. The primary hypothesis to be tested will directly influence all other aspects of the study, including the study design duration, the eligibility criteria, the amount of the test product, and the nature of the control. Human intervention studies should be hypothesis-driven and have a strong evidence basis. Therefore, a thorough review of the available evidence will need to be conducted. Let's put a simple and clear example. Let's say that we wanted to assess the effectiveness of a dietary education intervention program in preventing childhood obesity through the promotion of the consumption of fruits and vegetables. The hypothesis of this study would be that the participation in this school-based intervention program will have a positive effect, reducing the body mass index on children and increasing the consumption of fruits and vegetables. This hypothesis is based on the scientific evidence that demonstrate the positive impact of school-based intervention programs on increasing fruits and vegetable consumption, but also in the fact that none of them have previously analyzed the impact of a long-duration intervention in the prevention of childhood obesity. Once the study hypothesis has been defined, it will be important to define the study design. Let's imagine that there are already a number of exploratory studies related to our research topic. These exploratory studies are considered a cost and time-effective way of assessing potential effects of an intervention, but are usually a forerunner to controlled studies. These studies add to the totality of evidence but cannot alone determine the effect of intervention. In this sense, if these early studies have been completed, studies with greater rigor will need to be carried out to test the hypothesis. And for this purpose, there exist controlled studies. In controlled studies, in addition to a group of participants receiving the active nutrition intervention, there will be another group that will act as a control group. The outcome for this later group provides a suitable comparator, as it is generally inappropriate to assume that changes observed in the group receiving the active intervention during the study are necessarily entirely attributable to that particular intervention. Within this kind of studies, the following basic study designs are encountered generally as crossover designs or as parallel group designs. Other less commonly used types of studies include the factorial design and the cluster randomized design. Finally, there exist the quasi-experimental studies. Like randomized controlled trials, quasi-experimental studies are designed to estimate the impact of an intervention on a group of participants. Although they can be similar to randomized controlled trials in the design, they lack one or more key features of a true experiment. Most commonly, the element of random assignment or the intervention or control group is absent. Quasi-experimental studies are often used in public health, for example, for community food-based interventions. They are easier, quicker, and cheaper to implement than randomized controlled trials, and so require less forward planning and a shorter lead in time. Quasi-experimental studies can provide valuable information about the potential usefulness of an intervention, but their internal validity will be compromised compared to the randomized controlled trial design, and this limitation must be appreciated when interpreting the results. If we go back to our example, where we wanted to assess the effectiveness of a dietary education intervention program in preventing childhood obesity, a randomized controlled trial would be an intervention where participants or even schools would be allocated to two groups: the control group that did not receive intervention and the intervention group that received the intervention. In contrast, in a quasi-experimental study, only an intervention group would be participating and data would be obtained before and after the intervention. Another important issue to take into consideration is the selection of participants. In this sense, we will need to take into consideration, firstly, the eligibility criteria, which often include age, gender, health, and disease status, so functional, physiological, or clinical characteristics or demographic variables are used to define the study population. It is important to define eligibility criteria using objective quantitative descriptors wherever possible. For example, many nutrition interventions use apparently healthy participants, so health may be evaluated by using questionnaire on medical history or might be extended to a physical examination and the screening of blood and urine samples. Also, recruitment and participant flow should be defined. The study protocol should also state the methods by which participants will be recruited, and details of the recruitment process should be carefully described, with details of number of participants approached, screened, recruited, and completed the study. Informed consent should be obtained from all participants. In case of children, the written consent form should be signed by parents. When reporting the study, this information is best summarized in a participant flow diagram. For our hypothetical study, eligibility criteria might be children aged 6 and 12 years old, or even a number of schools interested in participating in the study. In this context, the unit of randomization in the latter would be the school. If the intervention delivery will be at a school class level, every children and, for instance, their families might be eligible. On the other hand, the duration of the intervention should be defined. Intervention study designs can range from a short-term study, where the immediate effect of the intervention is measured over minutes to hours, to long-term studies that evaluate the effects of the intervention over a period of weeks, months, or years. The important factor to be considered is that the study duration should be sufficient to allow changes in the primary outcome measure. Thus, the duration will be informed by data obtained from exploratory studies. Moreover, researchers should aim to use the minimum feasible duration for ethical reasons, to conserve resources, and also to avoid participants' fatigue leading to non-compliance or withdrawal. In some cases, post-study follow-up measures are desirable to evaluate persistence or other long-term effects. It should be taken into account that one of the most important aspects is to define the outcome measure. In this sense, the primary outcome measure should be clearly defined and related to the hypothesis. All intervention studies will assess outcome measures and will compare these between intervention and control groups, if a control group features in the study design. Most studies will have a range of outcome measures, but the study should be powered based on the pre-specified primary outcome measure as stated in the hypothesis, and the sample size should be calculated using that outcome measure. It is essential that the outcome measure is of biological relevance. In some cases, the outcome measure is clearly relevant, as it is a direct, objective measure of the impact on nutritional intake or status. Subjective measures are also used, such as feelings of health, appetite, or fatigue. In these cases, it is important to use validated instruments or questionnaires if these are available. From a review of the evidence regarding the impact of school-based interventions to promote healthy eating in young children, the main outcome measures that have been used are 4: health status, behavioral status, cognitive status, and affective status. In our previous example, the primary outcomes could be to evaluate differences in body mass index between the beginning of the study and the end of the study. For this purpose, for instance, previously trained assessors might perform an anthropometric evaluation. Secondary outcomes could be to gather the dietary intake in children. For this purpose, a 24-hour dietary recall could be obtained by nutritionists and/or trained interviewers. Also, food frequency questionnaires are used together with other validated questionnaires that allow to measure not only dietary frequencies but also children's eating style. In this sense, one of the most widely used validated questionnaires to assess eating style in young children is the Child Eating Behavior Questionnaire. On the other hand, if social, demographic, and family characteristics are wanted to be assessed, this could be done by surveys sent directly to parents that could contain a variety of questions about gender, age of the children, education of the parents, and so on. Finally, an important factor to take into consideration in every human study is the ethical approval and the study registration. Researchers should determine the appropriate local ethical approval and research governance procedures required for their study, and seek these approvals before the study begins. While not all nutrition research may be classified as medical research, it is recommended that researchers adhere to the World Medical Association's Declaration of Helsinki. One of its recommendations is that every clinical trial, including human nutrition intervention studies, must be registered in a publicly accessible database before recruitment of the first participant. The World Health Organization has stated that the registration of all interventional trials is a scientific, ethical, and moral responsibility. The academic view is that a prior trial registration is essential for ethical research in humans. We hope this information will be useful for the design of future human intervention studies you might aim to perform. Thank you very much for your attention.